Well, my argument for sales cycle comes down to how people consume computing today. Again, particularly in the enterprise, there's still a lot of siloed construction. There is still a lot of, we're selling storage to the storage people and security to the security people. We still haven't gotten away from that. So selling as a platform, that is a thing we are seeing more people take on, but I think it's pretty far from ubiquitous. And there's a lot of enterprises that would need to have their brains reshaped to consider some of these alternate models.
It's because a lot of enterprises still don't believe in the idea of buying things on a consumption basis, because they're still locked into this idea of Capex. You tell me the thing that you need and we will buy it. And 5 years from now, we will buy you another one. It's not this idea of we're going to rent this thing, whether it's in our house or in somebody else's data center somewhere. And when you need this new feature that's available, that's always been available, we're going to turn it on and the bill goes up $8 a month. Enterprises don't like that idea. They're coming around to it. They're getting a whole lot better at it because, well, let's be fair, guys like Corey Quinn have built their career off of the sticker shock you get when you turn on all the stuff, because enterprises don't like a huge outlay every month. Operational teams do, but there's no tax advantage to paying a monthly bill, whereas you can depreciate assets. So I think overall, where you're going to start to see that script flip is when people stop looking at enterprise IT as an asset and start looking at it more as a service. And I know that we've been saying that for God, how many years now?
I don't think it'll ever be that. I think there'll be some people, some percentage that'll want to say, I want my IT as a service, but there'll be some other percentage, and it could be 50-50, could be, who knows what the final will be. But I think there'll be people who want to pay consumption and people who want to consume it, buy it and own it. And that's the way it'll be for the next, until I retire, which is about as long as I care for.
There are a lot of people who prefer to buy their milk from the store and a lot of people who want to run a dairy. That number's changed a lot in the last 150 years.
Yeah, arguably.
So I guess I'm coming around to the opinion that disaggregation for the enterprise might be, I don't know how I would make that argument to a business stakeholder anymore that they need to go with a disaggregated model. Can I make the argument based on costs? Not really. Can I make the argument it's low risk and you can put any NOS you want on it? We'll get years out of the hardware. No. And the Broadcom thing recently seems like maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's even a riskier choice in some ways. Flexibility, choice, that whole flip the NOS thing. No one does that. So is that really an argument you can make? I mean, it sounds good, but once you've invested in a NOS, no one's going to change.
I think you're right for the average enterprise, but there's also a lot of companies out there who are not average enterprises. So people who have 10,000 servers and 20,000 servers in a data center, that's not
a diminishingly small number of enterprises, but I get your point. Yeah.
Yeah. But substantial in value. So one customer, sure, but many millions of customer dollars. And I think those companies are increasingly seeing disaggregation as viable for them. That is building their own cloud infrastructure, because once you're at that sort of size, they get to buy it, own it, operate it.
Okay, now we're at a thing, because if you're building your own cloud infrastructure, now you've got, presumably you're delivering a lot of applications to a lot of people. You've got a lot of churn. You have a strong need for automation. And if your network infrastructure is not lining up behind that, then you have a problem. And so you get to these purpose-built network operating systems that are designed to work well in an automated environment. Maybe then, but again, diminishingly small number of companies with that problem. The average enterprise, I don't think, has that problem because there's not as much application churn and need for constant provisioning and retooling of the network. But right, for certain people, maybe it's there. But again, the average company, I don't know how I make that argument. It's like, it'd be cool for them, but we don't have any of their problems. Just keep buying, buy the Cisco thing.
I think one of the issues is that disaggregation was essentially driven by cloud scalers. They had a business and operational model for which it made sense. And then some folks said, hey, maybe we can bring this to the enterprise. And so, some of the value propositions told to the enterprise were, we're giving you a fresh new NOS, doesn't come with a lot of bloat, doesn't come with a lot of features you don't use. It's brand spanking new and clean. It's going to run better and faster. It's going to be decoupled from your hardware so we can innovate on the software faster without having to wait if you're tightly coupled to some ASIC for that next generation of ASIC to come out and get new features. And third, I think the big thing was it's going to be better for your operations. Particularly Cumulus was giving this message. It's Linux at the core, so you manage it like you would a fleet of Linux servers. It's going to be automation friendly, and it's going to tie in nicely to your Det, Nev, Ops, whatever model that you have on the server side, you can bring that to the network side and then
Yeah.
get your finally get your network infrastructure to match the pace of compute and storage.
So-
Whether it worked out, now we're seeing.
Well,
that was
I think
the pitch.
that was the pitch, and I think there was a definitive effort by AWS, Microsoft, and Google to get out there and tell that story, because it drove the ASIC makers and the switch manufacturers, so EdgeCore, Acton, Delta, those companies, to get on board with their so they actually used to go out and spend a lot of money speaking at conferences and telling everybody about what they were doing. But the real purpose there was so the people who are involved could have a lot of fun going to conferences, and looks good on their resume, did all this touring or whatever. But B, it also created those vendors to get interested in making products that suited them. So companies like Broadcom and Innovium and Barefoot came to the market with products to meet the perceived need of what these companies would want. And in hindsight, were we wrong as enterprises to jump on board and think that what they could do would fit us? Do we need to put that aside and say, well, that's fine for Amazon, but it's not what we need down here on the ground?
I think the other thing that happened is the traditional vendors in the enterprise space saw disaggregation coming and realized, all right, we actually need to do something about this. So we've seen efforts from Cisco to sort of revamp their network operating systems, to expose APIs, to make it more automation friendly, to redevelop it in a more, using more modern techniques like modular development, so that you can run different pieces, that whether you need it or not, that kind of thing. So give folks more choice in how they run it and how they operate it. And that sort of, if you start to bring that to folks, then the benefits you would get from a full disaggregation model may become less prominent.
And so it feels.
So you're suggesting their competitive response to disaggregation and Whitebox has been successful to a lesser or greater extent?
I mean, it sort of blunts the impetus of wanting to switch to a Cumulus or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Juniper has Whitebox now. Cisco's got white boxes that some companies can buy if you've got a suitably large order volume.
The thing is, when you're a Cisco, you only need to be good enough to have a great deal of success against an upstart. And it took them a few years to get to good enough. But I think, at least from a marketing perspective, they've gotten it.
Okay. So what do you think about Dell? So Dell's open networking strategy looked like it was going to be a good idea for a while. They would sell their switches without an operating system and let other people in the ecosystem go and, look at companies like Pika 8, of course. Big Switch had their Big Switch Lite. Apstra says Cumulus Linux. They'll run their SDN on top and use Dell hardware underneath. Where does it leave Dell's open networking, which is Broadcom, but without Cumulus Linux and, available for Broadcom switches? And they've got service contracts on Cumulus, on Broadcom, on Dell switches. And there's a lot of people out there who did that. It's going to be interesting to see how Dell's networking division responds.